was put in theory by Schumpeter that every time there is new technology and some works become useless, instead of resting, society invents new kinds of work. It is said that in the future, an enormous proportion of works which exist nowadays will disappear and will be replaced by new works. So find new works is in culture of mankind. Another thing is complicate one's life in the whole of improving it. Another thing is always live at the edge and at the maximum that is possible to consume. If there is new source of energy, you can be sure it will be used for something. If the society gets new amounts of money, it will use it to do something, etc. If there is a new technology that makes transport faster, you can be sure that people will move further away from their places of work, and the amount of time which is spent in transportation will not decrease. It will remain as painful as before, just using the possibility of the new technology to change it. Also, very importantly, because work can be fun, interesting, like preparing a project, an event. So these are powerful incentives which do not obey rationality, which may be unpredictable. And in fact, it was one of the one can argue it was one of the biggest failed prediction of the economists from the beginning of the 20th century about the evolution of work. Let us quote here one of the great economists, John Maynard Keynes. This is taken from this beautiful newspaper, which I strongly recommend to you. It's called Le Un, the One. Each week it treats one subject in not just one sheet of paper, and always with very interesting points of view. You see, this is just one sheet of paper, all on the theme, which is how to reinvent one's work. Let us read Keynes. This was in 1933, a letter to his grandchildren. So let's try to translate. And he says basically that in a couple of decades there will come the time in which man will be completely free from work, because all the work will be done by the machines, and that it will be a big problem. And he says that as a transitory period, we will go back to a week of 15 hours for a good start. 3 hours a day and a week of 15 hours will be a useful transition to start. Because 3 hours of work per day will be amply sufficient to satisfy all our needs. He also said that it will be a big problem. It is a terrifying problem for somebody who has no particular talent to occupy oneself. And he also said, if we look at the occupation of the rich classes today, the prospect is completely depressing. Most of them have completely failed in solving this problem. So it's interesting to remind this. It was widely shared belief in those days that mankind would evolve in this way. It was also at the politicians. You read Churchill, you see that he believed that basically mankind would work very, very few, in very, very little in the future. And it was not true. And every technology which was supposed to simplify our lives and work less has also been used to work more. Take email. Beautiful technology. So fast, so easy, so quick, less work, and so on. It looked like something that would free us. What is the reality now? It's hours of work each day to answer emails. Each year I send something like 13,000 emails. It's a kind of constant, year after year, and so on and so forth. And it's still continuing, coming and coming, until you have the impression that you are slave of the technology which you thought was your slave, was freeing you from the work. That is interesting. I tell you, email at some point was a serious problem of health for me, because, spending, instead of sleeping, some of the time at night you spend answering emails. email, and so on. Some other examples that I will take from my own experience about work to live and live to work. Work to live in the sense that is not so happy for many people, for many researchers will be teaching, especially in American universities, where you are paid big salaries for teaching classes which are of not big interest, calculus classes. This is the key word for the professors, and it's a work in which, in addition, you are not supposed to be original. You are supposed to follow exactly the book as it is written, and for this you are paid quite good salary. And then in exchange of this, you may do your work for live for work mission, which is something like the research and so on. Take for instance this book. So this is one of my dear babies, Optimal Transport Old and New. It's the reference book on a subject which is optimal transport. Started in the 18th century, was developed by many people. So I worked on this book from, say, starting from 2005 to 2008. I estimated there is about 4,000 hours of work of mine in just this book. Did not bring me much money, that's for sure. Could have been much, much shorter. Actually, it was supposed to be 100 pages of lecture notes, and in the end it was 1,000-page book. Why did I do it? Just because I felt it was my mission, and because it was so such a task in which I found exaltation, and it was fascinating. At some point, the book becomes the master. You don't choose, like, I want to stop. There is this voice in you telling you have to continue, it's your duty, and so on. And you cannot put it down. And you do it night and day. You become obsessed at some point. There was some point, I will tell you another anecdote. When I was working hard on revising this book and preparing and working on my laptop, invited at some conference. So all the time I was typing, gave my talk, typing again, skipping lunch, typing and typing, until I, start fainting for lack of food, get some chocolate, type again, continue, it's my book, it's my book. At the end of the day, I arrive at the airport to go back. I look at the airplane and I thought, shit, I forgot to make a remote copy, safety copy of the book. So if the plane crashes, they won't be able to reconstruct the book in the form that it should be. So in that precise moment, the concern about the plane crashing was more about the book than about me. Of course, it is losing sense of reality. It is temporary. I assure you that it would not be the case now. But when you are in this, completely immersed in the book, your life becomes part of it. And it is a part of what makes the big projects. In such a state, you don't feel the pain of working, you accept everything, it's even a drug. Working on your project becomes something that completely fulfills you. Let me tell you another story from the same time. At some other point, it was on train. Many of my stories are in trains, in planes, whatever. That's because traveling so much. I was on the train, working on the damn book, on my laptop, and then no power again. No plugs. What do? I went to the bathroom, the toilets of the train, where there is some electric plug for shaving. Put it there and stayed there for the whole trip, typing and typing and typing. And it was just too painful, the idea to stop working on the book. This is this obsession. You get into it, and then things are being done. There are some extraordinary examples of obsessive work in a story of the arts, for instance. Maybe the most emblematic of all is the ideal palais ideal of the facteur Cheval. 93,000 hours of work by a single man who was considered a crazy man by everybody in his community. Now considered a big, important work of naive art. Let us make three remarks in relation to this. First is that there is this idea that work may be considered a value in itself. And in works such as Palais du Facteur Cheval, it's very clear. There is a famous tale by La Fontaine about the farmer.
Pin it down, and it has the quality of infinity. There's no way of talking about space, because it has no color, it has no weight. You can't cut it. You can't possibly chop it into pieces. And yet, at the same time, you cannot differentiate it from solids. Come to another important point here. That solid and space are in a secret conspiracy with each other. Actually, there's very little solid in the world. Most of what appears to be solid appears so by virtue of the speed at which it's jiggling. It's like an electric fan, which when put in rotation, the blades appear to form a solid disc. And this chair is solid for rather the same reasons. You can't put your fingers through it. It's moving too fast. But actually, whatever it is that's dancing in space is increasingly difficult to define. The more you think about energy, you see, and you can make a calculus of energy like you make a calculus of wiggles in the world, and you can say there are various waves or wavicles or particles of energy which we give all sorts of different names to. But the more we pursue it, the more it all seems to disappear. Like space, the more you try to think what it is, the more difficult it is. So in the same way, the more you try to say, now come on, let's sit down, what is this here? It's all right if you stop at a certain point. Then you say, well, now we know, that's practical. So let's not ask any more questions. Somebody, shut up. See? If you keep on asking questions, everything falls apart. You notice this in the scholarly world. Scholars spend far more time debunking than they do creating. Because everything that has ever happened has been debunked. You can show that there is no evidence. You know that Julius Caesar existed, not really. Certainly there's no evidence that Jesus existed, that Socrates existed. There's a great deal of doubt about Plato. Probably the emperor showed there was a myth, and so on. You know, you can go on in that indefinitely. Finding out that there really is no evidence. I don't know, probably the same sort of thing is happening with the Warren Commission. I don't know. Or that it's something that it didn't happen anyway. Because that is the work of the analytical intellect, you see. When you finally try to be God, that's to say, define it exactly. Now, just where is it? And let's get perfectly clear so that it's fixed, see? And it all becomes slippery. Because in order to handle the world, you see, you have to touch it rather gently. You mustn't try to pin things down. As they say in Zen, you do not try to drive a nail into the sky. Because that's the beauty of space, you see. There's nothing in it to hang on. It hasn't a hook to put your hat on, somewhere in space. And yet, it hasn't got a floor to fall onto. See, if space had a concrete floor on the bottom, it'd be pretty dangerous stuff. But it doesn't. There's nowhere in space to collide with space. You can run into somebody or something else, yes, but not with space. Figure then on this. Work on this hypothesis, you see. It's only a hypothesis at the moment, nothing more. That space is you. Because you are equally inaccessible to inspection. When you look to find out who you are, somebody like a Zen master will interrupt you and say, "Excuse me, but who is it that wants to know? And who is it that's looking?" Find out that. So you know you're chasing your own tail like a little dog. And you never catch up with it. There's all this, you see. So space is like you. Only we turned in the ordinary way to think of ourselves. We make the gesture like this. See? I'm here. We go this way. I can feel this. I'm inside it. It's me. See? But always when you get a certain feeling about things, examine the opposite possibility. That you are this. Now we're going to look in due course at the neurology of this, but you do see that what you see outside you and feel outside you is the way you feel inside your skin. Since all the optical images, shapes and colors and everything, are neurological states in the brain. So what appears to you as outside is the most intimate feeling you have of the inside of your head. Because you know, it's difficult to feel the inside of your head unless you have a headache or a tumor or something. But in the ordinary way, the inside of your head is unconscious, and a surgeon can open up your skull and put instruments in the brain and you won't feel them at all. Brain is very anesthetized. So in order to feel the brain, you have to look out there. See? And that's how it feels in the brain. So I'm just trying to give an indication of how to get the feeling of reciprocity. Of you on the one hand, it's easy to see, as I said, you depend on the whole show. Now I want you to see the opposite and equal truth, that the whole show depends on you. So that you don't anymore put yourself down as this wretched little bacterium living on this obscure planet that revolves around a minor star on the outer fringes of one of the lesser galaxies. This is the great 19th century put-down of man. How nice to be all unimportant. Watch out for this. Watch out for the political consequences of everybody is equally inferior. The political consequences emerging and becoming cleared as day goes by. Barbarism is the answer to that. Untrammeled violence, police states, and shocking disregard for human existence, because they're only wretched little bacteria. See? Let's get rid of a whole lot of them. Zip, burn them up. Now this is not unrelated, you see, to this feeling of the individual as someone who doesn't matter at all, which can be the reaction against the philosophy of life in which an individual mattered too much in the wrong way. In the Christian tradition, we have made the individual matter too much in the wrong way. That is to say, you as an ego are infinitely precious. God has made each one of you separately, and each one of you as a separate ego will last forever. And therefore you're all important in the eyes of God. But you better know your place, baby, because you're subjects of the king. But on the other hand, the other way of looking at the individual as an incarnation of the divine, as God, him or it or herself, coming on at God everywhere. Did you realize how fascinating that is? That if you were God, wouldn't it be fascinating to see myriads, to know yourself in terms of myriads of reproductions of yourself, all different? And really different. Like other people seem to be different from you. And they've got a secret in them. You don't know what they're going to do next. See? So they are alive. If I push you and you just go, bleh, I say it's only plastic. If you jump a little, I say,